Our story today is found in Matthew chapter 5. The events spanning Matthew chapters 5 to 8 describe an event which is often referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. During these scenes, Jesus sees the crowds following him. He goes up a mountainside and sits down, and then he begins to teach his disciples many things. You may remember that previously here at the house, we looked at one of these lessons in the story called Tzedakah and Greek Theatre. Well, today we are going to focus on another lesson Jesus taught his disciples in this same scene found in chapter 5, verse 13, wherein Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." Of all the lessons Jesus teaches his followers, and of all the things he likens them to, this is perhaps one of the stranger ones. You are the salt of the earth. Why salt? Although this imagery likely has a multi-layered meaning, just as salt has multiple functions, one we're going to consider today is salt's function when it comes to taste. Because salt, although it has flavor in itself, has a central purpose when it comes to food and cooking, which is to bring out the flavor of other things. In meals, salt is used to enhance the other tastes, to bring out the flavor in other ingredients, and to preserve them. A couple of years ago, a woman shared a picture on Twitter that ended up going viral. She had gone over to visit her boyfriend at his apartment, and when she went into the kitchen, she caught sight of something cooking in the oven. Her boyfriend's roommate was cooking chicken breasts for his dinner, only this is what the chicken looked like. Devoid of any seasoning or oil of any kind. This quite humorously produced both shock and a fair amount of jokes across the internet as people reacted to this picture. Cooking chicken without so much as a dash of salt. Salt, as we said, strengthens the flavor already present in other foods. It brings out their taste. And as Jesus explained in verse 13, if salt loses its saltiness, it also loses its function as salt. Now, I've heard some interpret this verse as meaning, keep yourselves pure by separating yourselves from anyone who isn't a follower of Jesus, otherwise you might lose your unique saltiness, and therefore be rendered useless, and you'll be disregarded and thrown out. But is that what Jesus was saying? Keep yourselves separate to preserve your saltiness? Remember, salt's very objective comes into play when interacting with other things. It is in our interaction with other tastes, other flavors, that our saltiness function becomes purposeful and consequential. Salt's use is not to merely make everything taste like one thing. Instead, it's to make everything taste better and more like itself. Those who follow Jesus are not meant to merely put their own flavor on other people. In other words, not to make others exactly like me, for who would like a meal which tasted entirely of salt? There can be a tendency to become focused on symbolically dressing God's so-called team up in one color, superimposing an apparition of unity, but which is in fact uniformity, where everything looks and tastes and sounds the same, where a person's legitimacy of being Jesus' disciple is being squeezed into a narrow box made up of local cultural rules and man-made status quos. And yet, the same Jesus who created the vast array of tastes and colors and variations, personalities, minds, passions, and diversities in the world, also created the great diversity that is human beings. And following him doesn't mean erasing those colors, but magnifying them. Uniformity means being the same, not changing or being different in any way. While unity is the state of being united or joined as a whole, a thing forming a complex whole. So when Jesus likens his followers to salt, he isn't asking us to pressure others into tasting exactly the same as us or to enforce uniformity. In fact, this is what he's warning his followers not to do, what they must never become. Instead, he invites his disciples to work as enhancers on earth, to bring out and nourish the good, delicious, rich, beautiful, good things in the world, to help amplify in others what God has already placed in them and is in the process of placing in them, to celebrate the flavors in the medley of human beings. Perhaps this is part of what it means to be salt in the world. And having this understanding can help shift our focus from us attempting to improve other people by making them carbon copies of us, because what is that doing? It's creating other people in our image. And that leads to a blandness, an insipid, pointless, crushing exercise. Instead, we can identify, treasure, encourage, uphold, and help bring out the fantastic essences the Creator placed in his creations around us. To say to another, I see these beautiful things in you, to invest in them, to mentor, to enable, empower them to be their beautiful and unique selves. What are some of the ways that you and I can be salty today, in the next week, in the next year, in our communities, in our homes, in our friend groups? How can we facilitate bringing out the best flavors around us and ask others, what do you love? What are your passions? What dreams do you want to chase? What things are you excited about, and how can I support that? Jesus, save us from losing our saltiness. Save us from our very great tendency to fear diversity or what is different from ourselves, and from creating a mass production of robots through pressure, bullying, indoctrinating. Help us not to demand our children to think and act like us, or bar the way for anyone who approaches you, but whom we feel doesn't conform to the narrow demands we often create in religious settings. May Jesus inspire us to bring out the good things in the world, and to swap out any tendencies of uniformity and rigid homogenizing with loving and upholding his vibrant tapestry.